All right, today we aren't just casually sipping a drink. We are launching a full-blown, high-stakes scientific investigation. Every single thing you experience in a glass of beer, every pleasant citrus note, every lingering bitterness, and every horrifying off-flavor is pure, documented chemistry. In this explainer, we are going to decode the exact chemical compounds that make a beer legendary and the volatile suspects that can absolutely ruin it.
Ever cracked open a perfectly chilled beer, anticipating that first crisp sip, but instead you get hit with the smell of wet carpet, or worse, rotten eggs, maybe even hospital disinfectant? Yeah, that's not just a bad batch or a bad dream. Those are real, scientifically documented flavor faults. We're going to expose exactly what causes them, and once you know the science, you will literally never look at a pint the same way again.
So let's dive into the forensic chemistry here. Meet prime suspect number 1, chloronesyl. This is the exact chemical compound guilty of that repulsive, musty, fungal, literal wet carpet smell. It usually happens when a trace amount of chlorine reacts with mold or bacterial infections in a brewery's water supply. Professional brewers have to fight this constantly through strict hygiene regimes and intense carbon filtration. And that brings us to another major offender on our list, trans-2-nanal. If you've ever tasted an old beer and thought, man, this tastes exactly like what cardboard, well, you aren't imagining things. That papery, stale cardboard quality is trans-2-nanal. It forms when oxygen attacks the fatty acids and lipids in the beer over time. It is the literal taste of oxidation.
But before we interrogate the rest of our suspects, we really need to understand how we're actually perceiving all this. It all happens across 3 sensory axes. First up, aroma. What your nose detects, like those volatile compounds we'll talk about. Second, taste. What happens right on your tongue, like sweet, salty, bitter, sour, and metallic. And third, a factor most people totally overlook, mouthfeel. Is the texture creamy? Is it thin? Is it drying? Every chemical we look at today directly manipulates one or more of these axes.
What's absolutely fascinating here is the stark contrast in engineering between different styles. Take bloggers, for example. They require precise, low-temperature engineering. They use under-modified malt and a bottom fermentation process that takes weeks of cold maturation just to produce a delicate, crisp profile. Contrast that with ales and stouts, which use warmer, top-fermenting yeast. Stouts even use unmalted roasted barley, leveraging the exact same Maillard reactions that brown your toast or sear a steak, just to give you that intense coffee-like bitterness. It's the same basic process, but radically different chemical outcomes.
Okay, rapid pattern interrupt here. Let's talk about a highly controversial volatile compound, dimethyl sulfide, or DMS for short. This one is crazy because it smells exactly like tinned sweet corn. Literally, cooked vegetables in your glass. But here's the mystery. In certain pale lagers, a tiny trace amount of DMS is actually considered a positive traditional character. But if you find it in an ale, boom, it's a major flavor taint.
So, here is an actionable tip you can apply in the real world. Next time you order a lager, don't just chug it immediately. Hold the glass right under your nose for 5 full seconds before taking a sip. Breathe in. You are acting as a human sensor, deliberately hunting for delicate floral notes from late hop additions and sniffing out any trace of that sweet corn DMS.
Context is literally everything in brewing, which brings us to diacetyl. This is a vicinal diketone, a specific byproduct produced by yeast that tastes strongly of butterscotch, toffee, or artificial movie theater butter. If you take a sip of a classic English ale or a stout and let it sit on your palate, you might find this buttery note, and it's totally intentional. But if you taste butterscotch in a crisp, clean lager, that is almost always a glaring sign of carelessness in the brewing process. Let's shift our investigation over to the volatile compounds. Think of these as the fragile accomplices of aroma. Hop oils, for instance, are the source of all that incredible floral and citrus punch you get in a modern craft beer. But they are incredibly delicate. If a brewer boils them for a full 60 minutes, the heat just vaporizes nearly all of them into thin air. That's exactly why aroma hops are carefully added in the final few minutes of the boil, or even steeped in cold beer, a process called dry hopping, to extract the oils without losing them to the atmosphere.
This fragile chemistry also applies to esters, which make up the fruity side of fermentation. Depending on the yeast chemistry, things can go in wildly different directions. On one side, high concentrations of ethyl acetate will smell sharp and solvent-like, almost like nail polish remover. But on the other side, isoamyl acetate is the exact chemical responsible for that rich, unmistakable banana character you find in classic wheat beers. Together, esters literally define the entire fruity profile of your drink.
Time for your second field tactic.
The retronasal test. Try this. Take a sip of a hoppy IPA, swallow it, keep your mouth totally shut, and breathe out slowly through your nose. That massive burst of fruit, floral, and spice you experience right there, it's not magic. It's pure chemistry. You are forcing those volatile esters and hop oils up into your olfactory receptors retronasally. This is exactly why experienced tasters always exhale after every single sip.
All right, we're entering the final third of our deep dive, and it is time to reveal the true mastermind of this whole operation. The secret logic dictating a beer's flavor profile isn't just the hops. It isn't just the malt. It's the invisible inorganic ions dissolved in the brewing water. These hidden minerals are secretly pulling the strings on the entire sensory experience.
Take a look at this hard number, pH 3.6. Water chemistry directly influences hydrogen ion concentration. If the pH drops below 3.6, you are going to taste a progressive, sharp acidity right there in the glass. If there are trace levels of iron in the water, you get harsh, literal metal. Low sodium can actually add a nice sweetness, but push it too high and it becomes sour and aggressively harsh. This invisible chemistry builds into perhaps the most highly manipulated hidden variable in professional brewing, the chloride to sulfate balance. Chloride enhances mouthfeel. It makes the beer feel lush, smooth, and rounded. Sulfate, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. It aggressively dries out your palate and cranks up the perceived bitterness. Brewers deliberately engineer the specific ratio to dictate exactly how the liquid feels in your mouth. You can literally see the real-world impact of this throughout history. If you take the exact same malt, the exact same hops, the exact same yeast, but you brew it in Burton-on-Trent instead of Dublin, you end up with a completely different beer. Why? Because the water is the variable. Those localized inorganic ions are the ultimate masterminds shaping the final product. But water chemistry also brings us to one of the most intense, overwhelming taints in existence: chlorophenols. If even a microscopic trace of chlorine in the brewery's cleaning water reacts with phenols, it creates a massive off-flavor. We're talking a taste that perfectly mimics medicinal mouthwash, TCP, or hospital disinfectant. It really doesn't take much to just completely ruin an entire batch. And here is where water chemistry meets biological variability. The wild thing about chlorophenols is that human sensitivity to them is all over the map. Some people are practically taste blind to this medicinal taint, while others find it completely repulsive at barely their concentrations. This massive biological variance is exactly why a professional flavor panel requires an absolute minimum of 8 trained human assessors. One palate? It just isn't reliable enough.
Which brings us to the visual climax of our investigation, the beer flavor wheel. Every single pleasant note, every horrifying off flavor we just uncovered, it's all mapped out right here. This is the global standard vocabulary. So when a brewer in Munich and a brewer in Cape Town both describe a flavor as resinous or papery, they are talking about the exact same documented, scientifically defined chemical experience. Every professional batch is tasted against a target profile on this wheel. It's not magic, folks. It's measurable, controllable chemistry.
So here's the absolute crucial takeaway. The next time you drink something that tastes a little off or genuinely mind-blowing, you now know there is a precise chemical reason behind it. We've cracked the case on what makes or breaks a brew. I want to leave you with this provocative thought. As you apply this forensic chemistry to your own palate, what hidden volatile compounds, sneaky taints, or masterful ion balances are you going to detect in your very next glass? Keep learning, keep tasting, and we'll see you in our next explainer where we dive deep into the fascinating science of dry hopping.